Every person cares about their personal image, how they are perceived by others. Each person has a spiritual soul that demands respect. They want to feel that they are respected by others. To achieve a positive self-image, for others to treat them with respect, to be valued, a person is willing to work hard. Some work a lot for money to become wealthy, even when they already have enough to live a comfortable and organized life. But they want others to know they have a certain house, car, and wealth. There are others for whom money isn't as important as their appearance, so they invest heavily in body development. Some invest in music, others even undergo cosmetic surgery, because how a person is perceived by others is very important to them. The question is, what is the most important thing in life through which a person can truly be respected and honored, to be admired by others? The king, who was the wisest man in history, says the following words: "By his wisdom a person is praised, but the perverse heart will be despised." He says that the most important thing in life is to develop one's mind, to be wise, to acquire knowledge, and to know how to conduct oneself. This is the true praise, everything else is secondary. By his wisdom, a person will be praised. The more wisdom a person acquires, the more correct their conduct will be. You can talk to them about any subject, and you will see that they understand. They are knowledgeable, can give good advice, and their knowledge extends far beyond daily life. This person will truly be praised because they are wise. On the other hand, a perverse heart, what does that mean? There is a verse that says, "The perverse heart will be despised," which was said by Saul, who was angry at his son. Perverse here comes from a distortion, a person who is swayed by emotions rather than wisdom. The verse says the heart, not the mind, meaning a person whose feelings lead them in the wrong direction instead of being led by reason and wisdom. A person whose emotions distort their life will be despised. This means a person can achieve great wealth, an impressive outward appearance, develop their body, sing beautifully, and have many positive qualities. But if they are led by emotions rather than reason, if their behavior is flawed, if they hurt others, if they have never invested in themselves to acquire wisdom or advance intellectually, such a person will be despised. In the beginning, people might get excited about him, be impressed, get closer to him and get to know him better. But in their hearts, they will already feel a sense of disdain, contempt, and this is something that is true even in relationships. Sometimes, before marriage, you can see the other person as very impressive. But after the marriage, you realize that this person is not what you thought they were. This is why it's so important before getting married to engage in deep discussions, to truly investigate who the person is and not be hasty in making decisions. It doesn't mean not to be hasty in the sense of delaying the relationship for years. That is definitely not the point. When you delay a relationship without proper boundaries, it is a bribe. The bribe will blind the wise. They won't see the flaws in the other person. But when boundaries are respected, you know you're being careful not to have physical contact, but you meet, you talk about relevant matters. You examine the person's character, their wisdom, their traits, their behavior. You also check how the person behaves in their natural environment, not just how they act during dates. How do they interact with their parents, siblings, people on the street, colleagues at work? King Solomon says, by his wisdom, a person will be praised. So, be wise. The question is, how can a person actually reach a point where they acquire wisdom and become truly admired and respected by others? How they look outwardly and how impressive they are in areas like money or possessions will bring admiration. But people truly admire wisdom. People value wisdom. In Jewish tradition, there are two definitions of who is considered a wise person. In one place it is written, a wise person sees what is to come. In another place it says, a wise person learns from every person. These are two paths to wisdom. The first, seeing what is to come, refers to a person who can foresee the consequences of their actions. What does this mean? When a child is in the womb, no one sees them. But the wise person knows, even before the child is born, that there is a baby in the womb. The person knows how things will turn out. While this can be explained in a figurative sense, the idea is that the wise person considers the consequences of every action. Before you do something, think about the outcome. For example, a person might get upset and want to lash out at their spouse. Before doing so, they should think about the aftermath. How will they feel after they say hurtful things? It's the same in business. You might get excited about an investment opportunity. Someone tells you that if you invest a certain amount, you'll make 10 times that amount and become rich. You imagine having properties and traveling the world. But think about the long-term result. Is this investment really going to succeed? Consult wise people, people who understand. This is the first principle of wisdom. The wise person sees what is to come. The second definition of wisdom is the wise person learns from every person. Even if the person is simple and you are in a high position or have status, you can still learn from them. But if you are a wise person, you are open to hearing good advice from anyone, even if they don't seem impressive on the outside. There is a great principle that everyone should tell themselves according to the words of the Ramban in his letter. The Ramban says that every person should consider another person as greater in something they have that you do not. This is also true for wisdom. A person should tell themselves, every person I meet in life surely knows something I do not. They have an advantage in something specific, and I have no reason to look down on them. A pilot is esteemed, but he meets someone who is a gifted musician. You may know how to fly, but don't belittle the other person who knows how to sing. They know how to write songs. There's someone who is an expert in computers, a tech genius. He meets someone who may not seem impressive at first glance, but you see that they know how to fix cars. You don't know how to handle that, how to work with it at all. There are people who have wisdom from life experience, and they can give you valuable advice. It may be that you are wise and intelligent, but there is an older person whose life experience equals wealth. The Talmud tells us that Abaye was the greatest of his generation, the most respected rabbi. He had a large yeshiva, and those who studied Talmud would meet him often. The Talmud in Kiddushin tells a story where Abaye, walking with his students, saw an elderly Gentile struggling to walk and needing to cross the road. Abaye approached him, offered his hand, and helped him across to the other side. His students were shocked. Such a great rabbi, respected by all, helping a Gentile. But Abaye wanted to teach them the importance of helping anyone in need, and to show respect to every human being, regardless of their background. He wanted to show them the value of an older person's life experience, which is wisdom of its own. Good advice can solve problems. This is what it means to be a wise person who learns from everyone. Such a person doesn't think, I know everything, I understand everything. Couples who are getting married, how important it is to seek good advice before marriage. They should take pre-marriage counseling, and the bride should meet with counselors at least 10 times before the wedding. It's worth paying for these sessions, as they teach not only how to handle a relationship, but also the laws of family purity and marital peace. This is wisdom for life. But some young men may think, what can they teach me? How to respect a woman? I already know. I have experience. This is a big mistake. The wise person learns from everyone. How many have testified that when they studied the teachings of the Rambam, they were sure they already knew everything? We once had a seminar in Eilat where a couple came. It was their second marriage. She had become stronger in her faith, and he was distant, even leaning toward the extreme left. But out of respect for her, he came to the seminar with her. During the seminar, we had a full lecture on marital peace according to the Rambam. Surely everyone here knows about this, and we've discussed it in lessons several times, focusing on how to guide the husband and wife. In chapter 9, Halacha 19 of the Laws of Marriage, The Rambam gives a list of instructions for a husband on how to behave with his wife. In Halacha 20, there is a list of instructions for the wife on how to behave toward her husband. We elaborated on this in a book on relationships. After a lecture, a man approached me, completely astounded. He said, "I can't believe it. I was divorced and paid a lot of money. I'm financially well off, and I spent a fortune on courses and guidance to avoid failing again in my second marriage. I went through training lessons and courses, but now I see that the Rambam, in just a few short passages, condensed everything I've learned. Everything is so clear, so concise, and beautifully put together." When a person connects to the manufacturer's instructions that God gave us, it's as though they're following a blueprint for success. The Rambam, from where did he derive these teachings? He collected them from the words of the sages and from the Talmud, gathering the instructions for the husband and wife on how to behave toward one another. Some of these instructions are practical behavioral patterns that lead to peace in the home. Others carry a deeper spiritual significance that impacts a person's soul. As the Talmud states, Rabbi Abba, whom we mentioned before, was a great Kabbalist, as attested to in the Talmud. He would say, "Honor your wives because you will become wealthy." What is the connection between honoring your wife and financial blessings? The answer lies in the Zohar. The Zohar explains that there are spiritual channels of abundance that descend into the world. All of creation is merely a physical shell for the deeper spiritual essence within it. There are 10 sephirot, spiritual attributes, that govern everything in creation. The 10th sephirah is called Malhut, sovereignty, which is the source of sustenance. Each sephirah has its own purpose, and the sephirah of Malhut has the influence of fertility, reproduction, and numerous other qualities. The female soul's root is in the sephirah of Malhut. The same is true for Shabbat. Its root is in Malhut. This is why Shabbat is called Shabbat Amalka, the Queen Sabbath. Similarly, in Judaism, a woman is referred to as a queen, and these are not just flattering words. The spiritual root of the woman's soul is Malhut, and she belongs to the world of Malhut, which carries a higher level of dignity and leadership. A woman who knows how to honor herself radiates nobility and sovereignty. Since the root of both Shabbat and the woman lies in Malhut, and this is also the root of sustenance, when a person honors his wife and keeps Shabbat, they receive abundant blessings. Honoring your wife is not just about respecting her physical form, but also the spiritual essence within her, the soul. When a person honors Shabbat, it's not just about observing the laws of Shabbat. It's also about wearing fine clothing as if attending a special event, not casual weekday clothes. Even if you are alone or traveling, you should treat Shabbat as if it's a grand event, because it is. You wear special clothes, and the Shabbat meals should be distinct from regular weekday meals. This is how one honors the Shabbat, which in turn honors the name of God. As it says in the book of Isaiah, "If you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your own pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord." When a person understands the wisdom of how to behave according to the Torah's guidance, they are able to handle the challenges of marriage, character development, and any doubts and uncertainties in life. The sages say, "Who is wise? He who learns from every person." If one learns from everyone, then certainly from those who are genuinely wise, those who are extraordinary, with immense knowledge. In Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, a person who studies it in order receives an enormous amount of wisdom. I have heard testimonies from people who were amazed after studying Pirkei Avot with commentary and understanding, not just reading superficially. They were amazed by the deep wisdom in it, like who is strong, he who conquers his desires, who is honored, he who honors others, and countless other beautiful teachings. How much wisdom is contained there, and how many valuable insights a person gains from studying them deeply. King Solomon says, If you want to be praised, instead of investing in money, which you no longer need, or in external things, invest in wisdom. This will accompany you throughout your life. Money can come and go, but your personality and the wisdom you possess will stay with you. That is why it says, according to his understanding, a person will succeed. Based on his intelligence, wisdom, and ability to make decisions, a person will be judged and succeed in life. When we talk about a wise person, we mean someone who can see the future, or who can foresee the consequences of his actions. This concept comes to expression in many ways. One example is the ability to delay gratification. Sometimes this ability to delay is tied to one's health. There are people who lack self-control. They see tasty food, and although they know it's harmful to them, they can't resist eating it. They may even eat healthy food but still struggle with moderation. There is a letter written by Maimonides, Rambam, that remains in Arabic, in which he shares advice with the Sultan of Egypt, Salah ad-Din. Rambam was a great doctor, and Saladin, the famous Sultan, took him as his personal physician. Rambam had fled from Spain due to the persecutions against Jews and arrived in Egypt, where religious freedom existed. The Sultan was so proud of having Rambam as his personal doctor that he would send him to other rulers who were struggling with health issues, as they had found that their doctors weren't helping. Saladin would say, "Send them my personal doctor, and they will see that he can solve their health problems." One of the letters written by Rambam to a sultan advises him about maintaining health. Among other things, Rambam writes, "I would rather that you eat spoiled food, but in small amounts, than eat the large quantities of food you are consuming, even if the food is healthy." Rambam was trying to make the Sultan aware of how much he was eating. As the Sultan had nothing to do all day except sit on his carpet and eat and drink, Rambam advised him to eat much less, even if the food wasn't perfect. In his halachic works, Rambam also writes that a person should not eat until their stomach is full, but should stop eating when it is about 3/4 full. In other words, when the stomach is almost full, one should stop eating. This helps with digestion and promotes long-term health. If, however, a person continues to eat until the stomach is completely full, it can cause long-term damage to health. A wise person, seeing the future, understands that actions today, even if they seem enjoyable or harmless, will have consequences later. Whether it concerns health, relationships, or our ultimate destiny, it's important to think ahead. For instance, a person should consider the afterlife. What am I taking with me to the next world? In Jewish tradition, before Rosh Hashanah, a time of judgment, some people would visit cemeteries. They didn't go to the graves of righteous people, but to regular cemeteries. What was the purpose of visiting graves? To reflect on life and death. This act was meant to inspire one to think about the future and the life beyond this world. Today we can maybe try to capture this in images, but back then there were no pictures. Do you want to see graves? You need to go there. People would go. What was the purpose? To reflect and think to themselves, one day I too will be here. All the people here were just like us, walking, coming and going, traveling, shopping, wanting a little of this and that, and each person wanted what people want today. If we look back 100 or 50 years, the world was full of people, just like today, and they wanted the same things that people want now. But today, across the entire earth, there is no one here from 100 or 50 years ago. There might be an old man in Japan who is 116, but from 100 or 50 years ago, no. This is the way of the world. So they would go to the cemetery before Rosh Hashanah to be a seer of the future. Even though they were seeing the dead, for them, it was seeing the future. This was their way of reflecting on where the world is headed, to take stock, to awaken, and to strengthen themselves. There is also the verse King Solomon says in the book of Ecclesiastes right at the end. After all the guidance he gives about how the physical world is fleeting and how we should focus on nurturing our soul, he faces the complex questions that arise in a person's heart. We studied Ecclesiastes here in class, and later the book came out after the lesson. In the final chapter, chapter 12, Solomon describes the period of old age. Let's read his words. He says, "Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, 'I find no pleasure in them.'" These are the years when a person feels there is no pleasure in life anymore, when someone becomes very old and no longer finds meaning in his days. Before the sun and the light, the moon and the stars grow dark, and the clouds return after the rain. He continues to describe the aging body, saying, "The keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men stoop," meaning the legs that once stood strong now bend, when the grinders cease because they are few, referring to the teeth that wear out and fall away, and those looking through the windows grow dim, referring to the eyes losing their brightness with age. He continues, but I won't quote everything until he says, "The dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it." Solomon mentions all this not to depress us or make us sad, thinking about how we'll look in our old age. Today, there are programs that show you how you might look in 50 years, and it's not pleasant to see those images. But Solomon is not trying to scare us or make us despair. He says, "Pay attention to all this and be wise, seeing the future. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, when you are still in the chosen days, the days of youth. Remember your Creator." In the Midrash of Ecclesiastes, "Remember your Creator" is explained. It brings a famous Mishnah from Pirkei Avot. Many people say it at funerals. The Mishnah says, Akavia ben Mahalalel says, "Look at three things and you will not come to sin." What does look mean in Hebrew? There is a difference between seeing and looking. To see is superficial, but to look means to reflect, to contemplate. If you only see something superficially, it won't have any impact on you. You can read this Mishnah 100 times, but if you don't reflect on it, it won't affect you. However, says Akavia, if you really look at these three things, reflect on them deeply, then you won't come to sin. Whether it's a desire in business, to cheat your partner, or some craving or anger, whatever temptation strikes you, he says, in that moment reflect on these three things, and you'll cool down. You won't sin, and your life will be good. What are these three things? Where did you come from? Where are you going? And before whom are you destined to give an account? He then elaborates, from a putrid drop you came, reminding yourself that you came from something humble and small. When a person says this to himself, where did I come from? Each person was once a tiny drop, almost invisible, and that drop could have disappeared without ever developing. This brings humility. And where are you going? To where will you go? To dust. When we reflect on this, it brings us humility and perspective. Dust, worms, and decay. Ultimately, everyone enters the grave, and that is what remains there. Prior to this, we discussed the body, dust, and death. But now the focus shifts to the soul, and before whom will you stand for judgment? Before the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed be He. What this means is, when you overcome a temptation, you might wonder, how much reward will I receive? But if I fall into sin for a momentary pleasure, am I going to pay for it later? Let's be logical here. The King of Kings is not like a human judge that you can trick. There was a time when a person could be a con artist and still escape judgment because the judge might not know the truth and, with the help of a good lawyer, could go free. A former football player, now a religious returnee, shared his story. He was once at the height of his fame, making a lot of money. He associated with bad people who invited him to join in a bank robbery. He wasn't drawn to the money, he had enough, but for the thrill. People sometimes reach a point where the excitement is all that matters to them, and they're willing to do foolish things for it. King Solomon warned about this. If you are full, do not seek more thrills, lest you be filled and vomit them up. If you want excitement, stay hungry, set limits for yourself, as the Torah teaches. If you stay within boundaries, you will enjoy life more and not burn yourself out. But he didn't understand this at the time. He had lost interest in everything and went along with them. He participated in the robbery, and they managed to escape, but they became suspects. He was one of them. The police came for him, and while they weren't sure about his involvement, there were signs. He had money, so he hired the best lawyer in the country. He said to her, "What do they want from me? I'm a player with a lot of money. It's not logical." They debated the case in his favor, but the investigators were clever. They interrogated him thoroughly. He started feeling close to breaking down, but didn't reveal anything. Then his lawyer told him, "You need to tell the truth." He was torn, but admitted, "Yes, I was involved. Let's work out a plea deal." She looked at him and said, "What are you talking about? This isn't you." And in the end, she got him acquitted. With humans you can trick the system, but before God, the King of Kings, you cannot. He is the witness and the judge. This is why Akiva ben Mahalalel taught, look at three things, and you will not fall into sin. When there is tension in a relationship between you and your spouse, your ego may prevent you from apologizing, but if you reflect on these three things, where you came from, a disgusting drop, where you are going, to the grave, and before whom you will give an account, God, you will gain humility. If you reflect deeply, it will help you overcome your pride, and in doing so, you will avoid sin. You'll see that there is no sin you can fall into when you keep these thoughts in mind. In the Midrash on Ecclesiastes, it brings the Mishnah from Pirkei Avot on this verse, "Remember your Creator in the days of your youth." The Midrash says the following, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, "Three things. Look at them and you will not fall into sin." Akavia ben Mahalalel learned these three principles from two words in the verse. What words? The words your Creator, Borecha. As is known, the Tanakh is not vowelized. The Torah scroll in the synagogue is not vowelized. Why? Because if they were to add vowels, you would essentially lock the verses into a single interpretation, according to the focus of the vowels. The Torah has 4 layers of meaning: Peshat, simple meaning; Remez, hint; Derash, homiletical interpretation; and Sod, mystical meaning. Pardes is the acronym for Peshat, Remez, Derash, and Sod. It's like a building with 4 floors, where each floor serves a different purpose. One floor could be a vegetable shop, another a wedding hall, another living spaces, yet all are true. The verse contains all of these, and each layer has 70 faces, like a polished diamond, where each angle you view it from gives you a new meaning. This is the beauty of the Torah, which is divine wisdom that one could spend an entire lifetime studying without ever fully uncovering all of its depths. For example, every morning in prayer, we say the verse, "And great peace will be your children." The Midrash teaches, do not read your children, Banecha, but your builders, Bonecha. What does it mean? Your children means your sons, but your builders refers to those who build you. What does it mean? Do not read it this way, but read it this way. It's all true. When you read it in the simple sense, Peshat, it means your children, your sons. But when you go deeper into the interpretation, Derash, it refers to the Torah scholars who spread peace in the world and build the Jewish people. The same word changes meaning based on the vowels. The Torah does not have vowels. You could read it differently, where the letter Aleph could be absorbed, and you could read it as your Creator, or the well, Borecha. referring to where you came from, the well of life. You could also read it as your well, referring to where you go after 120 years, the grave. So when we say remember your Creator, we remember both where we came from and where we are going, and we give an account to our Creator after our time in this world. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi teaches that Akavia ben Mahalalel learned these principles from the word your Creator. He derived the understanding of the origin, where you came from, your destiny, where you are going, and the importance of remembering your Creator at all times, especially to avoid sin. This teaches us the principle of being wise and seeing the future. A person should think about their future, not only the immediate future in this world, but also the long-term future, including old age. This is true for financial matters as well. Many young people have a good income, but don't think about the future. They spend money on expensive vacations, luxury restaurants, and social events. But what about your future? You need to think about your future. Think about marriage, saving for a home. If you're paying rent, you're wasting money. Instead, save for a down payment, buy a house, and pay off a mortgage. Every shekel you pay toward your mortgage becomes much more valuable over the years. Don't just spend on rent. Pay the mortgage with the same amount you'd spend on rent, and you'll build equity. Save for your future, and be wise in seeing the future. King Solomon himself provides an example of wisdom and seeing the future in the next verse from Ecclesiastes. The poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. King Solomon himself gives us an example of being wise and seeing what is ahead. He says, "Good is the one who is humble, but the one who is arrogant loses everything, who is honored and lacks heart." The term noble here refers to someone who acts with gravity. There is a person who behaves with honor, which is a weighty and serious matter, while naked implies lightness and frivolity. Solomon says that good is the one who is light, meaning that they do not take themselves too seriously and maintain a sense of humility. But eventually, when that person becomes wealthy and has servants, Solomon warns that it may lead to loss. He contrasts this with someone who refuses to work in any capacity that he deems beneath him. Such a person, believing that he is too important to do certain work, may end up in poverty, with no food to eat. Solomon teaches that it is better to have servants than to be overly proud and end up destitute. Rabbeinu Yonah, one of the great early commentators, explains that there are three levels to this idea: negative pride, which is bad; respectability, which is the right middle ground; and disgrace, which is the lowest level to avoid. Each person must maintain their dignity, but also avoid falling into the trap of arrogance. The middle path is the most balanced, where a person does not look down on others, but maintains their self-respect. Regarding work, the Talmud teaches, it is better to handle the carcass of an animal in the marketplace than to say, "I am too important for this." Even if a person must do work that seems beneath them, it is better than idleness. It is better to work humbly and not refuse necessary work, because it is not honorable. In the end, Solomon's teachings encourage us to understand the wisdom of life and the Torah. We must be wise and balanced in our approach, seeing the long-term outcomes of our actions. Wisdom is not just for the moment, but for a well-guided future. What does contemptible mean? Noah acts lightly toward himself. This parable is about money, but it is also about Torah. You have friends who do not support you going to a Torah class while they are going to a soccer game. You tell them you're going to a Torah class and they laugh at you. You feel belittled in their eyes, but you are told to stand by your principles. Even though you now act lightly toward yourself, in the end, you will discover that the evil inclination has become your servant. Good, contemptible, and servant, not that the evil inclination becomes a servant, you control it. Who feels honored and lacking in someone who feels, "I am now honored," but in the end is lacking the wisdom of Torah? So, Explain the commentators here that in reality, a person remains ignorant, unlearned, and an amharetz because he wanted to watch a movie, watch soccer, or travel. Nothing meaningful comes from that for his life. And indeed, in our Torah, there is so much wisdom. Sometimes we hear from young people who say they were looking for wisdom. So they traveled to the Far East, to China, to India. They traveled to monasteries, and Buddhist monks sat there with their disciples, wanting to teach them words of wisdom. And many of them, I heard personally, tell how, when they were there, the famous guru, who everyone admired, heard that they were Jewish and said to them, "What are you doing here? Go back to your country, to your Torah. All the wisdom is with you. Why are you coming here?" Because truly, our Torah contains everything, and everything is within it. There is a famous story, and we will finish with that. It is about Isaac from Krakow. He was a poor man. He lived in a small cottage. In Krakow, winters are very cold. They had the stove with wood, as was common in those days. This story is told that it is written on a plaque in the synagogue in Krakow, called Kra. He was poor and hoped to break through the financial barrier. One night, he dreamt a dream in which he was told that under the bridge leading to the royal palace in Prague, there was a treasure hidden, and if he dug there, he would become rich. He woke up in the morning, told his wife, "I am not opening the shop today. I am going to Prague." She said to him, "Prague is a long journey. What about work? What about earnings? I'll come back with millions." "What is this madness?" she asked. He said, "I had a dream. No matter how much she tried to convince him, it was hard, and he didn't work this month. He insisted on going to Prague. He rented a cheap inn, just so he could stay there until he dug and found the treasure. When he reached the royal palace in Prague, he saw the bridge and all the soldiers patrolling there. He wanted to dig under the bridge, but it was hard to approach. For days, he would sit by the bridge, looking, and then go back to the inn. He didn't want to take the risk. What will my wife say? One of the officers in charge of the patrolling soldiers grew suspicious because the Jewish man kept coming every day, sitting, looking, and walking around. The officer approached him and said loudly, "Tell me, what are you doing here? If you don't give me a convincing answer, I'll throw you in prison." His heart sank completely. "I came to make money, and now I am being thrown into jail." He burst into tears and told the officer the truth. "I had a dream that there is a great treasure under the bridge here, but you are all here patrolling. I have no way to get there. Could you help me?" The officer burst out laughing and said, "You are really crazy. For a dream you are traveling from place to place? I also had a dream. I dreamed that in the city of Krakow there is a Jewish man named Isaac, and under the stove made of bricks there is a great treasure. So, what do you think? Should I leave everything and go there? Get out of here." He chased him away in shame. Immediately, Isaac returned home, entered the house, and began breaking the stove with a hammer. His wife thought he had completely lost his mind, but he found a chest filled with treasure. He became very rich, and with the money from the treasure, he built the synagogue. It is said that the plaque telling this story is still there today. This story about Isaac from Krakow is an interesting one, but it contains a great moral lesson. How many Jews go to great lengths just to discover that the treasure is at home? One does not need to go collect wisdom from the nations of the world or other places. Thank God, in the Torah, you have all the wisdom. We will conclude with a blessing for all the viewers. May God grant everyone abundance, joy, health, and protect the soldiers of Israel wherever they are, that they may return home healthy and complete.